Good afternoon to the public. Good afternoon, counselors, and good afternoon, staff. This is the 32nd meeting of the 24th Council, and I will call this meeting to order. All of our counselors are present via Zoom. Counselor Benton has informed us that he will be joining us, but he will be joining just a little bit late. I would like to begin our meeting this afternoon with a moment of silence. But I would like to offer this moment of silence to some of our residents who I've just recently learned of their passing. I would like to honor Adán Dino Cariaga. Adán was a santero and an artist in our community, and he was very involved in our community. And we learned of his passing this week. And today I learned of the passing of Bobby Unser, who was a famous race car driver. And as many of us know, the Unser family has been very prominent in Albuquerque. So we would like to honor Bobby's memory. And I would just also like to say that I remember when we worked on West Central, we worked closely with Bobby Unser and his family. And one other person that I would like to honor who I learned of his passing is Dennis O'Brien. Dennis actually lived in Rio Rancho, but he was very active in the community. And I just want to ask that the council and the public take a moment of silence, and all others who have passed recently.
Madam President, and there's also another young man who passed away. His name is Stephen Gomez. Everybody knew him as Sparky, and he was actually part of the Lowrider Task Force, and he was the one that had the little hot dog camper that everybody's very familiar with. And he just recently suddenly passed away as well. So
thank you, Councilor Pena. We will add them to our list and all others that we want to keep in our memory. Thank you, counselors. I also wanted to mention one other person that came to mind, Pete Tartaglia. Pete Tartaglia was a retired firefighter with the Albuquerque Fire Department. So thank you all for that. And Councilor Jones, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today in English, please?
Yes, I would. Thank you. If you join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jones. Councilor Pena, would you lead us in the pledge in Spanish?
Sure. Thank you, Madam President. Juramento a la bandera, juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y la República que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. We appreciate that. I just want to read some information into the record for the public. As was noted in a press release from our office on Friday, posted on our website and noted on our published council agenda, this meeting has special procedures and is being held via Zoom video conference. Members of the public, city staff, and the media have the ability to view this meeting live through 4 different platforms: GOV TV on Comcast, Channel 16, the GovTV website, YouTube, and Zoom webinar. These live streams can be accessed from most smartphones, tablets, or computers. Also, this meeting is closed captioned, and you may enable the closed captioning service on your television or device at this time. For those watching on live stream, thank you for joining us this afternoon. The video recording of this and all past council meetings are also available for viewing at any time on the City Council's website. Council staff is available via telephone if members of the public need assistance finding the videos online. Please call 768-3100 for assistance during regular business hours, which are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The council is accepting live general public comment today, as well as any written comments. Written comments received by 1 p.m. today were distributed to all counselors in advance of today's meeting. And thank you, counselors. With that, we will move on to our presentations, our proclamations and presentations. But before that, I would just like to give a shout out. So on Saturday, I was up in Counselor Jones's district over by the Academy, and I was in the little Del Norte shopping center, and I noticed a young man who worked for Suntran. There was a young lady that was disabled, and she was waiting for the Suntran bus. And I was sitting there observing. I noticed the driver and how patient and really understanding he was. And his name is Stephen Morgan. So I later on, after he boarded the passenger, I just went out to him and I told him that, if we had, and I know we have a lot of city employees much like him, but they don't always get recognized. So I want to just recognize our our Suntran driver, Stephen Morgan. And with that, I'm going to move on to Councillor Sena, who has a proclamation for us. And then that will be followed by Councillor Bassan, who also has a proclamation this afternoon for us. So Councillor Sena.
Thank you, Madam President. Today I have a proclamation recognizing Asian American and Pacific Islander American Month. And to receive this proclamation is Dee Wang of the Asian Business Collaborative. Whereas there are more than 42,000 Asian Americans living in New Mexico and are among the fastest growing and emerging communities of color in New Mexico, and whereas Asian Americans in New Mexico come from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Cambodia, China, India, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Japan, Korea, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Pakistan, the Philippines, Taiwan, Thailand, Tibet, and Vietnam, as well as other locations. And whereas Asian Americans have worked on the railroad and in agriculture in New Mexico since the 19th century and fought bravely in World War I, World War II, the Korean and Vietnam conflicts, the Gulf War, and in Afghanistan and Iraq, and have received congressional medals of honor, Purple Hearts, and other military commendations. And whereas this year represents the 56th anniversary of the passage of the Federal Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson at the foot of the Statue of Liberty on October 3rd, 1965. And whereas Asians are also affected by the Federal Immigration Act of 1917, which designated an Asiatic barred zone of much of Eastern Asia and Pacific Islands from which people could not immigrate to the United States. And whereas the United States Senate Resolution 201 passed by unanimous consent, including New Mexico Senators Jeff Bigeman and Tom Udall on October 6, 2011, acknowledged that the exclusion laws were incompatible with the basic founding principle of the United States, that all persons are created equal. And whereas the United States House of Representatives Resolution 683, expressing the regret of the House of Representatives for the passage of laws that adversely affected the Chinese in the United States, including the Chinese Exclusion Act, was supported by Congressman Martin T. Heinrich, Steve Pierce, and Ben Ray Lujan. The resolution was placed on the suspension calendar and passed unanimously by the 112th Congress by voice vote on June 8, 2012. And whereas on January 11, 2020, the city of Albuquerque, the county of Bernalillo, and the Albuquerque Chinese American Alliance also celebrated the unveiling of the sculpture View from Gold Mountain, commemorating the landmark historic Chinese American civil rights case, Territory of New Mexico versus Yi Shun of 1882. And whereas on April 26, 2021, the U.S. Senate passed Senate Bill 937, the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, on a 94-to-1 vote, facilitating the expedited review of COVID-19 hate crimes and requiring DOJ to issue guidance for state and local law enforcement agencies on how to establish online hate crime reporting process in multiple languages and how to expand culturally competent education campaigns due to hate crimes rising to nearly 150% in 2020 against Asian American Pacific Islanders. And whereas Asian American Pacific Islanders are contributing to our local economy with their labor, business, and purchasing power, and artistic contributions are a strong part of the narrative and historical context of our city and state with their unique culture, customs, and traditions to our already richly diverse culture and deserve to have their humanity in all its shapes and forms be recognized. Be it proclaimed that the council, the governing body of the city of Albuquerque, hereby recognizes May as Asian American and Pacific Islander American Month. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Senna. That was beautiful. Ms. Wang, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm Dee from Asian Business Collaborative, and we founded in July 2020 in direct response to a long-standing need for support within the Asian business community in New Mexico. And its inception came at a time when Asian business are being disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Since the start of this pandemic, Asian business owners here in New Mexico have experienced an increase in violence, racist remarks, vandalism, and hate crimes. In addition to anti-Asian harassment, assault, and discrimination, Asian business owners across New Mexico and nationwide have experienced a severe loss of wages and commerce. ABC will support our Asian community and also Asian business community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wang. Would any councilors like to address Ms. Wang? Thank you, Ms. Wang. I would like to say that any form of discrimination in our city is unacceptable. So thank you for being with us this afternoon. We very much appreciate you and appreciate your community as well. And thank you, Councillor Senna.
Thank you. Madam President, if I can actually ask a few questions. I believe Councillor Davis has a question or comment as well. So I'll let him go first before I go.
Councillor Davis?
Go ahead. My coworker here is got me a little distracted. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, Ms. Wang, can you actually, I know that Asian Business Collaborative has a few events coming up. I just want to first also thank you for your hard work. For everyone that does not know or didn't get to catch it, we did a 2-hour-long town hall regarding the COVID-19 vaccine in 3 different languages that were all simultaneously broadcasted via social media, which was not easy. And doing interpretation for 2 straight hours is not easy either. So I just want to recognize Dee for her contributions on that. But Ms. Wang, can you actually share with the council what Asian Business Collaborative has going on, including the vaccine clinic that's coming up, or any festivals that I know that Asian Business Collaborative have been working on?
Yes, thank you. So our big project last year was the PPE drive. So we distributed our PPE boxes where we work cooperate with the city and to give our local businesses their box of PPE to help their business reopen. And this year, when the Bernalillo County is turning yellow and green now, and we're helping more small businesses in town to have a box of PPE to prepare for that. And recently, we're cooperating with the Albuquerque Community Foundation and also a medical team and John Moss Pharmacy. We're trying to open a vaccine in town just to serve our Asian community, because we know there's still like confidence issues within the community, and we would like to from the town hall to remove their hesitance and bring their resources in front of them. And we're also cooperate with New Mexico Asian Family Center to provide language service. So not only for the vaccine spot, but also for our daily business, we are providing language support and culture support. And next year, we're planning on a big festival event for our Asian community. And we're trying to create it's more focusing on the business part. And we would like to show all the people about our business community and just give them the opportunity to share our culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wang. Would you like to just mention where those events are going to be held?
So we're going to the next month. We're still try to decide the specific date. Supposed to be around like mid-May to the end of May. But the place gonna be John's Pharmacy. I believe it's on Central, and we will release more detailed information once we have it. And also translate into different Asian languages to help people to know those resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilor Sena, would you like to close?
No, just thanking the council for your support and recognizing May as Asian American Pacific Islander Month. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us today, Ms. Wang.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we are going to move on to Councilor Bassan. I believe you have another proclamation to discuss this afternoon. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. This proclamation is recognizing Foster Care Day, pardon me. While we do not have anyone accepting this proclamation live during this meeting, they are watching on YouTube live today. Ann McKinney is a District 4 resident and on the board of directors for New Mexico Child First Network. She's someone who reached out and advocated for this, and whom I am grateful to for doing so. The proclamation reads, whereas children are key to our community's future success, prosperity, and quality of life, and whereas children have a right to thrive, learn, and grow in a safe and loving environment, and whereas foster parents and resource families, including kinship caregivers, provide the love, safety, and stability that children need in order to overcome past traumatic experiences in order to reach their full potential. And whereas Albuquerque foster parents are caring for and nurturing about 1,000 children and youth in foster care today. And whereas Albuquerque foster parents are helping birth families heal so children can be safely reunified. And whereas Albuquerque foster parents help children transition from foster care to permanent homes through adoption or guardianship. And whereas we must come together as a community to recognize the important role everyone has enhancing the lives of children in foster care, for children who have experienced abuse and neglect, supporting family reunification, and building strong communities. And whereas there is always a need for more foster parents in order to ensure children, especially older youth, children with complex needs, and siblings, have a safe, stable home in their community. And whereas there are numerous individuals, nonprofit organizations, and public servants who are dedicated to raising awareness about the needs of children and youth in foster care. And whereas through partnerships with families, child welfare staff, and public and private agencies, there is a collaborative effort to ensure that children are supported and successful. Be it proclaimed that the council, the governing body of the city of Albuquerque, hereby recognizes May 4th as National Foster Care Day in honor of all who act as true champions for the children in foster care. We don't have anyone to speak, but I think that it goes without saying that foster parents are absolutely people that are seeing some of the most bleak conditions for many children. And I believe that we need to do whatever we can to support them so that they can do what many people are not emotionally or mentally or physically equipped to do in that position. So thank you to all foster parents for everything that you do to help children.
Thank you, Councilor Bassan. That was very special. Any councilors like to address Councilor Bassan's proclamation today? Thank you for raising awareness regarding foster parenting. It's a very important issue, and parenting is even more important these days because of COVID and kids staying home. So thank you, Councilor Bassan. Okay, with that, we will move on. And I know Councilor Bassan and Councilor Pena have a bunch of kids that they have had to raise, and congratulations for doing that. That's outstanding. So we're going to move on to economic development discussion, counselors, and there's none today. So with that, we're going to move on to general public comments. And just for the record, I would like to read some information into the record. Hello to those joining us to provide live public comment. We also received written comments that were distributed to all counselors in advance of today's meeting. Members of the public will be able to address the council if they have signed up for live public comment per the instructions published on our agenda on our website on Friday. Speakers will be moved into a meeting room 2 at a time. They will remain muted with their camera off until they are called upon to speak, at which point they can turn on their camera, unmute themselves, and will have 1.5 minutes to provide comments to the council. After that, they will again be muted and return to be an attendee of the Zoom webinar. So here are the public comment ground rules. Each participant has 1.5 minutes to present. Comments are to be addressed to the counselors only through the council president. Any disruptive conduct will result in removal from the Zoom webinar. There will be, again, a 1.5 minute time limit. The timer will start once you begin speaking by our Zoom moderator. Mr. Julian Moya will let you know when your time is up. Mr. Moya, could you please call the name of the first speaker?
Thank you, Madam President. Our first speaker is Ann Dunlap. Please go ahead and unmute yourself, and your 1.5 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
Good afternoon, Ms. Dunlap.
Okay, can you hear me now? Thank you, Madam President, and greetings to the counselors. My name is Ann Dunlap, and I live at 2710 Veranda Road Northwest, near the Rio Grande Nature Center, which is at the west end of Candelaria Road. I want to speak about Bill number 2154, revising some of the criteria for establishing restricted parking areas. I live in a neighborhood which has just experienced the creation of new restricted parking, where a couple of rules fell through the cracks, one being that the neighborhood association be notified of an impending restricted parking action. I'm especially glad to see that this bill will require at least one public hearing before such an action is approved, so that all affected parties can have some input into the process. Throughout the city, there are residential streets next to public parks, schools, museums, etc., where folks come in to park to access what is nearby. These folks pay taxes for the construction and maintenance of city streets along with the rest of us. I believe they deserve reasonable access to those streets. My home is on a street near the Candelaria Farms, where non-residents often park to view the wild bird preserve. People park in front of our house and up and down the street, so I'm not speaking as a person who has not experienced this. I encourage the council to pass this measure, making the provisions as fair and as inclusive as possible. And I thank you for your time. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Madam. Next speaker, Julian.
Thank you, Madam President. Our next speaker is Kevin Bean. Please feel free to turn your video on, unmute yourself, and your 1.5 minutes will begin when you start speaking.
Sir, you're muted.
Okay, got it. Thanks. Hey, good afternoon. My name is Kevin Bean. I live in Kernwell. Madam President, members of the council, in August of 2019, this council via R187 declared a climate emergency. Emergency response action got sidetracked a little bit by the pandemic, but we're getting back on track. About 2 weeks ago, as called for at R187, Mayor Keller's administration released a revised climate action plan. That plan is available at cabq.gov/sustainability. I'm here today to ask that the council likewise get back on track with its climate emergency response action. In addition to the guidance for such action in R187 and the climate action plan, climateemergencydeclaration.org has some helpful resources specifically for local governments. I've included the address for 2 of them in written comments I submitted today. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bean.
Thank you, sir.
Madam President, we had 3 other individuals sign up to speak, but none have joined the webinar. So that will conclude public comments.
Would you double checked on that? Okay, apparently our 3 other speakers are not signed in. So with that, counselors, we will move on. We will move on to questions and answers from the administration. I do not have any pre-submitted questions from any counselors, but I would like to give counselors that opportunity if they so desire. And if you would just use your raise hand button if you have anything, otherwise we will move on. I do not see any counselors wanting to ask questions today. Thank
President,
you,
I'll go
counselors.
ahead
So we
and
will
move
move on to our journal. And Counselor Gibson, I would ask that you make a motion, please.
Certainly, I move approval of the April 19th journal.
Thank you, Counselor Gibson. Do I have a second? Counselor Sena, thank you for that second. So with that, then we need a vote. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, counselors. That passes on an 8-0 or 9-0? 9-0. Thank you, Counselor Gibson. We will move on to our communications and introductions. Are there any changes to the letter of introduction? I don't see that there are any changes. So Counselor Gibson, would you like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll move approval of the letter of introduction.
There's a motion. Do I have a second, counselors?
I'll second.
Counselor Jones, thank you. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
thank you, Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, counselors. The communications and introductions passes on a 9-0 vote. And I would just mention that Counselor Benton did join us under the journal. So he did vote on both of those items. So counselors, we will move on to reports of committees, and I do not see any tonight. So we will move on to deferrals and withdrawals. And I know that Counselor Benton, I think you might have a deferral.
Madam Chair, I'll deal with that when we get to that item. I'd like to discuss the item before deferring it.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Counselors, I guess there are no other, I don't see any other deferrals or withdrawals at this time. So with that, we will move on to our consent agenda. Are there any changes to the consent agenda? And I will start. I would like to pull item A off the consent agenda, EC 307. Are there any other items, counselors? If
Madam
not,
President.
and I'd just like to read this into the record. For the individuals on tonight's consent agenda who are being appointed to serve on a board or commission who may be watching from home, thank you for your willingness to serve our city. Counselor Gibson.
I
Would
move
you like to
approval
vote?
of the consent agenda.
Counselor Gibson, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Counselor Gibson. I need a second.
Second.
Counselor Pena, Counselor Davis, Counselor Benton. Thank you, counselors. We will move to Ms. Ortega.
Madam Chair, if I could just quickly, before the vote, I just wanted to apologize to two appointees who are on the letter of introduction tonight. I was mistaken and told them that they would be on the consent agenda tonight. So sincere apologies and a great appreciation to Ms. Laura Harris and Dr. Carl Horak, who are on the letter of introduction to serve on the Biopark board. So we'll be approving them at our next meeting, and I just wanted to put that in there. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Benton, for that clarification. We have a motion and a second. Ms. Ortega?
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis.
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, counselors. That passes on a 9-0 vote. So I had pulled one item off the consent agenda. Counselor Gibson, I'm going to turn that one item over to you as I will be recusing myself on this particular matter.
All right. This is item A, EC 307, the ground lease agreement between the Saylor Family Trust and the City of Albuquerque, located at 3712 Edith Boulevard Northeast. Move approval.
Second.
So is there any comment from the administration on this? So I see no comment. Any questions from counselors? All right. Ms. Ortega, could you take a vote for us, please?
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
8-0 with Counselor Borrego recusing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Gibson. We will move on to our announcements. And we will begin with Counselor Bassan, followed by Counselor Sena, followed by Counselor Jones and Counselor Pena.
Thank you, Madam President. There will be a Finance and Government Operations Committee meeting on Monday, May 10th at 3 p.m. via Zoom video conference.
There will be a Public Safety Committee meeting on Tuesday, May 11th at 3 p.m. via Zoom video conference.
There will be a Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee meeting on Wednesday, May 12th at 3 p.m. via Zoom video conference.
There will be a committee of the whole meeting on Thursday, May 13th at 3 p.m. via Zoom video conference.
Thank you, counselors. We have one of our public speakers has joined us, Miss Peggy Norton, and Julian has allowed her to come into the chat room. So Julian, would you like to let her in, please? Ms. Norton, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I guess I am really still trying to learn how to join these city council meetings because was on some others. Well, I was on GovTV and I couldn't use that, so I went to YouTube. Anyways, I'm Peggy Norton. I'm president of the North Valley Coalition. And we wanted to express our support for 054, the permit parking ordinance. Our executive committee has met. We've met with several of the the neighborhood associations within the area. This is a bill that does affect the whole city, but is right now really affecting access to the Bosque. This bill provides public process and guidelines before on-street parking can be denied to the general public, and we support that. We'd also like to give a shout out to Councillor Benton for acting so quickly on this and getting an ordinance going and looking at the process and what can be changed. The one thing we would like to suggest as an amendment is that there be a review for the permit parking designation, and that it could be reviewed, which would include a public meeting in case when conditions change. And that all alternatives before permit parking is established, all alternatives be looked at, and maybe just something so simple as a sign that says residential area, be considerate, post a few of those around. And so I've spoken before, that's about all I really have to say, but we certainly want to support this.
Thank you, Ms. Norton, for your comments this afternoon.
Thank you.
Councillor Benton, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, yes, if I could. Thank you, Madam President. I just want to thank Peggy. She's the, I don't know if she wants me to say this, but she was the person that first brought this to my attention. And my first reaction was, well, these people followed the procedure, and, you know, so unless the neighborhood association comes up with something, I'm not, you know, inclined to do anything. But the more I looked into it, it was clear that, you know, we really do have a broken process. So I thank Peggy and the North Valley Coalition for bringing this to my attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Thank you, Ms. Norton. With that, we will move on to our next order of business, which is public hearings. And there are none scheduled this evening, so we will move on to approvals. Councilors, Councillor Benton, OC 30.
Thank you, Madam President. OC 30 is the staff recommendation to appoint Mr. Richard Johnson to the Civilian Police Oversight Agency Board. I move confirmation.
Thank you, Councillor Benton, and I have a second from Councillor Davis. Are there any questions, councillors? And thank you for Mr. Johnson for stepping up. Ms. Ortega, would you like to? I'm sorry. We have a hand raised, and I'm trying to see who it is. Councillor Bassan.
Thank you, Madam President. I know that there were some questions that were asked at the previous council meeting regarding Mr. Johnson, and I'm wondering if that was resolved or if he's here tonight and we were going to follow up with that, or if we're just going to continue on with the confirmation and no questions answered.
Councillor Benton.
I was not a person who raised the question. I'm aware of what it is. I believe there may be other councillors who might want to comment on that. A lot of unusual things have happened over the last year during the pandemic. This was one of them. I'll just speak for myself. Madam,
you're the one who raised that issue.
Pardon me? I'm sorry.
I said, Councillor Davis, I believe you raised that issue at the last meeting. Did you have any comment?
No, Madam President. My questions have been answered to my satisfaction. I understand that I'm satisfied in that regard, and I'd follow Councillor Benton's lead. It's his nominee, I believe.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, any other comments? Counselor Bassan, I'll go back to you. No.
That's all. Thank you, Madam President.
All right, with that, we will, does the administration have any comments? Is there any from the administration? Apparently not. Okay, so we will move on then to a vote. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Benton.
Yes.
Counselor Davis.
Yes.
Counselor Gibson. Counselor Gibson.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Counselor Harris.
Yes.
Counselor Jones.
Yes.
Counselor Pena.
Yes.
Counselor Sena.
Yes.
Counselor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, counselors. That passes on a 9-0 vote. Congratulations to Mr. Johnson, and we look forward to working with you. We will move on, counselors, to final actions. This evening, we have one item under final actions. Counselor Benton, 054.
Thank you, Madam President. 054 is amending the traffic code to implement additional guidance for the establishment of new residential permit parking areas. I move a due pass.
Thank you, Counselor Benton. Is there a second? Counselor Sena offers a second. And I believe you have 3 floor amendments this evening, Counselor?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And let me make sure I can operate 2 devices at the same time. I think I can.
We call them the first one floor amendment number 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
Proceeding.
Okay. Thank you. So this would be,
Counselor?
yes, this would be floor amendment number 1. I'll move this and this is on page 1, line 16 through 18, amend subsection B as follows. The relative value of on-street parking for non-area residents to allow access to community amenities and resources, and this is the additional language, balanced against any significant impacts on the area residents that may justify the need for parking limitation or restrictions. And this amendment specifies that the impacts on the residents of any given street from on-street parking by non-area residents must be evaluated.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll second that.
Thank you.
Are there any questions, Counselor, on floor amendment number 1? If not, we'll move on to Ms. Ortega for the vote. Oh, Counselor Bassan, I'm sorry. I'm not seeing your raised hand option, so I must need to go to the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm just wondering, do we have a metric or a definition of what significant impacts means?
If I may.
Yes, Counselor Benton, go ahead.
Council President Borrego, thank you. Councilor Bassan, the metric for significant impacts, this is guidance to the department. And so that's going to be up to them to think through whether there's a significant impact. This amendment is all about trying to achieve balance. And the way the permit parking original language was created and the enabling language do greatly rely on the department to come up with these metrics. And this bill also kind of is very much tailored that way. I don't know whether Mr. Melendres can elaborate any more than that.
Chris, would you like to address that?
Madam President, Councilor Bassan, I don't really have much to add other than just to say that to echo Councilor Benton's statement that this is an ordinance that is administered by the administration through a program, and there are rules in place, and presumably those would be changed related to this. And so there is a balance for the council, I think, in adopting these types of ordinances to give the right guidance, but not necessarily need to provide all of the detailed components that would be shaken out sort of through the process that's administered by the department. And so the term significant impacts, I think, is relevant and important because it focuses on impacts that are more meaningful. If the council gave guidance, are there any impacts? Maybe that's a little bit less descriptive than impacts that have a meaningful outcome for people living on that street. So that's where the language comes from and why it's worded that way.
Madam President, if I may.
Councilor Bassan, did you have a question?
Well, I'd like to just follow up real quick on my thought on that. I'm all for balance. I think it makes sense. I think it's a good idea. I think that it's really hard to visualize how balance is going to be achieved by saying significant impacts with no definition, being that what's significant to one person may not be significant to another. So I think that it would be great if somewhere down the line, we can get maybe a definition of what that means, or maybe we can have follow-up coming back to us on what the department ends up coming up with in the means of what is significant impact.
If I may, Madam President, thanks for this, Councilor Bassan. I think it's a legitimate question. I'm wondering, and I want to ask Chris, if this would it matter whether we use the term? I mean, we're looking at impacts overall. We're going to be hearing from people about their thoughts about impacts, whether they're minor or major. And so could we just strike the word significant from this amendment? Would that, and I'll ask Councilor Bassan if that would help from her standpoint. If not, we'll leave it for later.
I guess, Madam President, if.
Go ahead, Councilor.
I mean, pending what Mr. Melendrez says on that and whether it keeps the same value of what you're trying to achieve, I think that it just, I guess, makes a little more sense, right? I mean, again, what's significant to me if somebody's parked right in front of my house versus 3 houses down, that could be something that can be argued when people are really upset. And I think that we need to make sure to have that leverage. So yes, Councilor Benton, I think that for the sake of clarification, that might get us one step closer and still achieve balance. So thank you.
So I'm going to consider that a friendly amendment. If we strike the word significant, then it would read balanced against any impacts on the area residents that may justify, et cetera, et cetera. So that leaves the door pretty open, Councilor Benton. Are you sure you want to leave it open to that extent?
I'll just ask Mr. Melendrez on that. Is this a significant change or not?
Well, I mean, the language that you use is going to guide how this ordinance is administered. And so, if we were to open up the definition, the dictionary and find the definition of an impact, it would probably be pretty easy to find an impact from any action on a given street. I mean, the context is whether or not parking by non-area residents is going to create an impact. And so the presence of extra vehicles, is that an impact? That is. Is it a significant impact? I think that's the question that the amendment is getting to.
Emergency reported in the building. Please evacuate the building by the nearest exit. Do not use the elevators.
Councilors, hold on just a moment. We may be having an emergency in the building, so please hold on just a moment. Councilors, we're going to have to take about a 5-minute break to find out what's happening because there is an emergency in the building. So if you'll just bear with me, just stay online. We may have to adjourn.
Please There has been a fire emergency.
If we haven't already, can we just make this decision here and ask FTC to stop our live streaming, and we'll get back to it when we get our. Thanks.
Madam President, how do we know?
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? There has been a fire emergency reported in the building.
Counselors, we are going to have to take a
Evacuate the building
15-minute
by the
break.
nearest exit.
There is a fire emergency in the building, and we do not know the nature of the emergency at this moment. So if you could just take a 15-minute break, we will come back in 15 minutes.
Or not.
For those who might still be on the line, we're okay over here at City Hall. Apparently there was an inadvertent trigger by building maintenance to the fire alarm. It's not a true emergency. We are still going to continue with a 15-minute break, and we will return here shortly after 4. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Tony. We're still going to take about a 10-15-minute break. So I'll let you know once we're getting back. So about 4:10. Thank you.
If you're joining us again, this is the City Council meeting, and we are back live. That was a false alarm that we had in City Hall. Someone set off one of our emergency alarms, so we apologize to the council and to the public for that. But we were in discussions, just for memory, on Council Bill 054, Councilor Benton, and we were discussing floor amendment number 1. Councilor Benton, would you like to continue that discussion?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. We're still on that first amendment, and I think Mr. Melendres was kind of in the process of talking about the value of the word significant as opposed to not including that word. And so I wanted to let him continue, and then we'll take it from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. Mr. Melendres.
Thank you, Madam President, councilors. I don't remember exactly where I left off, but I'll try not to waste too much time. So, I mean, the value of the wording, I mean, the language that you use is going to be used to administer this ordinance. We may not all agree on what constitutes significant, but in like any ordinance that this council passes that is administered by the city, the folks administering the ordinance are charged with using reasonable discretion when they're applying the ordinance. And so as long as their judgment is reasonable, which it most always is with respect to folks working for the city and administering this type of thing, we don't necessarily need to agree with what they believe to have been significant. However, it is of value to give guidance to the people administering this ordinance as to what the council had in mind. Is it merely somebody parking on the street? Is that significant? Not sure. Is it so many people parking on the street that no residents have the opportunity to park and they need to park? That probably is significant. So that's why the qualifier exists there, to give a little bit more guidance to the folks that are administering this.
So Mr. Melendres, are you suggesting that we keep that word in?
I think that I've explained its value, and if you concur with sort of my explanation of it, then you should keep it in, because that gives a clearer intent for what you're proposing. But if you are comfortable with just letting it be administered with any impact and kind of having the ambiguity of what that could be as well, I'm not sure that it's any better without that term. But it's really up to this council as to what their intent is, your intent is when approving this amendment.
Okay, I'm going to go to, we have several councilors with their hands raised. We have Councilor Bassan, and then I'm going to go back to Councilor Benton to make any comments or close. Councilor Bassan.
Thank you, Madam President. I think given what we've heard and what we're discussing, I really don't see the benefit of taking away the word significant. I think it probably is actually operating like it's going to provide a more specific, which is what we're looking for with this avenue to find a solution. So I don't know, and I will defer to the sponsor on it. I appreciate the ability and the time to be able to discuss what will or won't work with this, but balance is important. It absolutely is. I just hope that in a perfect world, somewhere down the way, the administration might come up with what significant impacts means in regards to this. And maybe let us know. I think that would be beneficial, and the public should know, because we should be able to use some kind of measurement in order to determine what legislation we're creating and what makes it significant. How are they going to measure? So when they figure that out, it'd be nice to hear, please.
Thank you, Councilor Bassan. Councilor Benton.
Thank you, Madam President. And thanks, Councilor Bassan. During our break, I got to think about it a little bit more, but this is enabling, we're amending the enabling legislation, and that's the way it was set up. So I didn't kind of necessarily introduce it that way, but that's kind of what we're in the process of talking about here. And they will, under the ordinance, they will have to come back to us with an executive communication of how they propose the actual program, and so this is direction to them. It's not, and hopefully, I think the balance, there are going to be all sorts of impacts, as Mr. Melendez said. So I think I would like to just leave the language as is, Madam President, and urge your support.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Unless there's any other comments from councilors, we will move on to the vote. Ms. Ortega?
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0 on Amendment 1 as drafted.
Thank you, councilors. That passes on a 9-0 vote. That was floor amendment number 1. Councilor Benton, we will move on to floor amendment number 2.
Thank you, Madam President. I move floor amendment number 2. This reads as follows: on page 2, line 7, insert a new section 2 as follows, and then renumber the other sections accordingly. So section 2 reads, enactment of this ordinance constitutes the amendments contemplated by section 1 and section 2 of R21-144, which is the, the resolution which kind of got us to this point, and that was enacted. However, the city shall evaluate the residential parking permit area restrictions on Trellis Drive and Decker Road between Campbell Road and Candelaria Road pursuant to the changes enacted herein, and reinitiate enforcement or otherwise rescind fully or partially the restrictions on those streets only as deemed appropriate based on its evaluation. So this does specify that this ordinance is satisfying the conditions from R21-144 and directing that those decisions and restrictions be evaluated once the department has come up with their, and the division of parking have come up with their criteria. And I don't know if I got a second there.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. I'm looking for a second on this floor amendment number 2, and I see a second from Councilor Bassan and from Councilor Davis. Are there any questions regarding this floor amendment number 2, councilors? It doesn't appear that there are any questions. So with that, we will move on to the vote. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
thank you. Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0 on floor amendment 2.
Thank you, councilors. That's floor amendment number 2. It passes on a 9-0 vote. Councilor Benton, we will move on to floor amendment number 3. If you'd like to summarize that.
Thank you, Madam President. I move floor amendment number 3, which on page 1, lines 24 through 26, amend subsection 3 as follows. The mayor shall submit an executive communication. This is language that's already in there, and you can see on the screen the changes. The mayor shall submit an executive communication to the city council for approval of each instance of the establishment of residential parking by permit area designation. The proposed residential parking permit area will become effective only upon the city council's approval of the respective executive communication. So that is the process by which individual ones will still come before us. And again, we're not trying to direct exactly what is in that executive communication. That's up to the division and the department to propose to the council.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. Do I have a second for floor amendment number 3? Councilor
Second.
Sena, Councilor Bassan. We have several seconds. Are there any questions on floor amendment number 3, councilors? I don't see any questions, so we will move on to the vote. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0 on floor amendment 3.
Okay, counselors, so floor amendment number 3 passes on a 9-0 vote. And we will move on to the original bill. Counselor Benton.
Madam President, if there are no other comments from counselors, I just want to say this has been an interesting little task for the last couple of months. It wasn't something I chose to jump into, and as I mentioned to Ms. Norton, at first I was just like, well, they followed the rules, so it's happening, and I don't know what we can do about it. But in looking at it more, it really did bring forth the complexity of the issue of on-street parking and its value. And in some places, it doesn't have all that much value. A visitor may come from time to time and they park in front of your home. But in other places near attractive areas, whether it's commerce or a park or an open space, it is more complex, and we have to look at it on a broader scale of what's best for the community, and that may involve some compromises and some finding a middle ground. So I do urge your support. Appreciate your attention to this, councilors.
Madam President.
Yes.
Madam President, if I might just weigh in a comment on this.
Mr. Rael, please.
Thank you, Madam President. And Councilor Benton and members of the council, appreciate the discussion on the amendments. I think it's important just to recognize that each of these areas that we have issues like the ones we have been talking about, that it does require a certain amount of subjectivity, if we will, and decision-making on the behalf of the staff to make the best decisions they possibly can as it relates to these issues. And we will do our very best to try and establish some criteria that we can utilize going forward, because what's happening for example, at the nature center, if you will, versus what might be happening up at Elena Gallegos are very different and very different circumstances. So the ability to have some flexibility in making those decisions is appreciated, but also the fact that in many cases, as you all know, you all as elected officials, the mayor as an elected official will respond to the concerns of the constituents of the community. And so we may be able to make some good decisions on some of these, and some of these will probably have to have more conversation. But do appreciate, Councilor, your willingness to let the staff at the parking division and the department help make those decisions work for each individual community as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Rael. Any other comments?
If I could, yeah, I should have said this before. I've said it in previous meetings. Nobody did anything wrong here with the way this was done. Everybody, including the applicants and the parking division, it was done according to some rules that were written who knows when, and they were pretty slim. And those rules did not provide a lot of guidance. So that's this kind of mundane stuff, but very important to people who are impacted. So I appreciate the administration's working with us on this, and do urge your support.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. I will consider that a close. And with that, we will move on to Ms. Ortega on the vote.
Counselor Bassan.
Yes.
Counselor Benton.
Yes.
Counselor Davis.
Yes.
Counselor Gibson.
Yes.
Counselor Harris.
Yes.
Counselor Jones.
Yes.
Counselor Pena.
Yes.
Counselor Sena.
Yes.
Counselor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0 on 054 as amended.
Thank you, councilors. Thank you for that, Councilor Benton. Apparently my earphones are not working, so I'm just going to continue. We are going to move on to item number 055, which is my bill actually. And this is by request from the administration, and it's amending section 13-5-2-1, ROA 1994, the Albuquerque Cable Franchise and Hearing Board to rename it to the Albuquerque Cable, Internet, and PEG Advisory Board to enlarge its membership, to augment its duties to reflect changes in the Comcast franchise renewal ordinance and technologies, and provide a PEG appeal process. And counselors, this is in your iPad if you haven't looked at it. I wonder, I will make the motion to approve this, and I need a second. Counselor Bassan, thank you. Counselor Davis, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions from counselors?
Madam President.
Counselor Gibson.
Yes, I wonder, I see that we have Miss Yee with us. I'm wondering if she can just kind of give us a little bit of an overview on this. I read it, but I think it would be helpful if I had a little help from Miss Lee, because she's always so good at providing that
Thank
help.
you, Counselor Gibson. Yes, Miss Yee, I see, I know she's very knowledgeable, so I'll turn the floor over to you. And we also have, I guess, Dr. Shel Sanchez on. Ms. Yee, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam President and Councilor Gibson. Thanks for your question, Councilor Gibson. And I'll say at the outset that this ordinance is tied to the Comcast franchise ordinance. And I would say also, to lay some foundation here, that the legal department is shepherding the consumer protection provisions of the Comcast ordinance. However, the Department of Arts and Culture, headed by Director Shel Sanchez, is managing most of the other parts of the ordinance, especially the public access, education, and government part. So the high overview of this ordinance is that, number one, the Cable Board ordinance or amendments to the Cable Board ordinance brings the ordinance up to date as far as the consumer complaint process. The ordinance before the ordinance as it currently stands emphasizes the city of Albuquerque's ability to regulate rates, whereas the city actually lost that authority through a ruling of the FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, in 2011, which made a determination, where the FCC made a determination that there is effective competition in this market. So that happened in 2011. In 2019, when the city of administration and Comcast reached an agreement on the renewal, there were new consumer protection provisions put in place, Cable Board essentially being a mediator between Comcast and unhappy consumers. And so that the amendments bring that process into the Cable Board ordinance. Secondly, there is an appeal process for the constituents with regard to the allocation of public access, education, and government resources, resources to the public access, education, and government channels, which are cable television channels. And I'll leave any questions up to Director Shel Sanchez and Hakeem Bellamy, the deputy. And last, the the amendments to the ordinance make it a lot clearer that the Cable Board is a platform for constituents to both learn about the availability and the quality of internet services within our community, and sharing information about that. Currently, there is no community board that is taking a look at that and coming up with community information about that very important issue. So that's the high overview, Councillor Gibson and Madam President.
Thank you, Monsieur. Does that clarify things for you, Councillor Gibson? I would also like to hear from Ms. Sanchez if you have anything that you'd like to add.
Thank you, Madam President, councilors. No, we are very happy with what we've been able to do over the last 3 years with the public access channels. And we are so appreciative of Jane and all the work she's done. She's been a great guide as we've really tried to focus on making the public access channels very public and very accessible again. We're really proud of the studio, we're proud of the programming and the way we've really shifted where these resources go in terms of contracts and in terms of how we interface with the public. So I'm proud of this, and I'm really happy. Jane has really been instrumental in helping us shift this ordinance to really reflect the work that needs to be done now, as opposed to the work that was being done before. And I feel like this ordinance really, really reflects the changes that are critical. This is a place, this board is a place when people are maybe not happy with what they're seeing on their public access channels, or they feel like maybe things aren't being managed well. This is a place they can go and actually talk and provide input. And that really hasn't been clear before. Those of you that have been on council know that council was kind of the place for that for a long time. And now there's a community board that can really have that conversation and hold that space for our community. And we think that's really important. So I thank you for your consideration as we make these important changes. Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Sanchez. I see that Councillor Benton has a question.
Yes, not a question, but a comment, Madam President. And I'm pleased to see this change. You know, those of us who have been on the council for a while just continually would hear the complaints and the concerns and the feeling that there was just kind of a staff committee that was dealing with all of this and not, you know, the broader community being involved. So I'm very pleased with where we're going with this. I think the council still needs to really stay on top of the whole process and you know, explain it to our constituents. But so I thank Director Sanchez, and definitely thank Jane Yee, who I have been involved in. She's helped with all sorts of things having to do with public utilities and public, not just utilities, but public assets for which the city is a part, and maybe sometimes just a consumer, and other times like this where we are the provider. But we're very lucky to have Jane Yee in our city government. So hats off to her.
I would concur with your comments, Councillor. Thank you. Any other comments from any other councillors? Councillor Gibson, you had originally asked the question. Are you satisfied?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Yee, Director. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, councillors, we will move on to the vote. I do not see any other questions. Ms. Ortega.
Councillor Bassan.
Yes.
Councillor Benton.
Yes.
Councillor Davis.
Yes.
Councillor Gibson.
Yes.
Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Pena.
Yes.
Councillor Sena.
Yes.
Councillor Borrego.
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, councillors. That passes on a 9-0 vote. With that, we will move on to item number C, which is 057, relating to redevelopment and leasing and sale of a metropolitan redevelopment project. Councillor Benton.
Bear with me just a second. Thank you, Madam President. 057 is relating to the redevelopment, leasing, and sale of the MR project within the Sycamore Metropolitan Redevelopment Area. consistent with the terms of the Sycamore Metropolitan Redevelopment Plan, approving the Metropolitan Redevelopment application entitled Highlands East, authorizing the acquisition of land and existing improvements and construction of a building within the Sycamore MRA. I move a do pass.
And I'll second that, Counselor.
And-
I see that Miss Iverson is on. Counselors, do you have questions before we go to Miss Iverson? I see Counselor Davis's hand up. Counselor Davis?
President, however you'd like to manage it, whether she'd like to give her presentation first or I can ask first, it doesn't matter.
Would you like to wait until she gives her presentation? She may answer your question.
That's fine.
Miss Iverson.
Thank you, Madam President, City Councilors. This is a approval of a tax abatement for the third phase at the Highlands project. It is a $50 million project that will create 228 units in 5 stories. We really haven't seen a project of this scale and this height in downtown or the central corridor, so it's really quite exciting. The project meets the goals of the Sycamore Metropolitan Redevelopment Plan by encouraging private investment and creating a mixed-use district. One thing that is unique about this is that we are processing this as a tax abatement and not as a bond. Based on legal counsel and legal review, it was determined that the bond financing legal gymnastics is not required, and that the city can move forward with this as a lease and tax abatement structure, which is what we have proposed. I'm here to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from counselors from Ms. Iverson? Counselor Davis, you still have your hand up?
Thank you, Madam President. I did. And Ms. Iverson or Mr. Real, I know he and I had a chance to speak about this earlier. Ms. Iverson, I'm just curious, as a part of this proposal, are there any requirements for minority business engagement, for example? In other words, does the contractor have to engage with minority subcontractors, et cetera, in order to qualify for the tax abatement? Or is that not yet considered in our agreements?
President Borrego, Councilor Davis, that is not a part of this agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Iverson. I want to raise that question not because I want to stop this project. I think it's a very good one and I'm excited to see it moving forward, but it's one I think we ought to consider for future projects where someone is receiving a public benefit, of whether we might consider requiring some of those minority business inclusion efforts so that we can continue to grow our minority business community, especially in the construction area and for some of these big projects that they could certainly benefit from. So thank you, Ms. Iverson. I hope that's a conversation we can start for the future.
Thank you, Counselor Davis. I agree with you.
Madam Chair, this is Sarita in the conference room. If I may just respond to that as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Madam President, Counselor Davis. As you may recall, we're in the process of getting a disparity study done, which Council helped us to fund. And so I think that'll provide a strong basis for being able to make those kind of determinations without getting into any legal issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Nair. Counselor Gibson.
Thank you, Madam President. So I'm also really excited about that area. I was down there just a few days ago. First time I've been down that part of Central in a very long time, and was astonished, happily so, to see so much completed or near completion. So I definitely support this bill. My one question is, I understand that we're allowing a 7-year abatement. Is there any other financial I hate to use the word subsidy, any other financial assistance that the city is helping them with on this project?
President Borrego, Councilor Gibson, The only other subsidy that is provided is every project that is built within an MRA area gets a impact fee waiver. So this would also get that, and that's sort of just done at the, it was passed as an ordinance and is done for all commercial development in MR areas.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. I do have a question, Karen, regarding, and it's sort of related to Councilor Davis's question, but with regard to hiring local, I just wonder, as you do your review your development criteria, and I presume that this went to the Development Commission, is there any provision for hiring local?
Madam President, there is not a requirement. Our current application has a sort of list of community benefits that we ask for projects to meet. One of them is a commitment to hire locally. This project is not going to have a lot of permanent jobs. It's mostly the construction aspect of things. So for this project, the applicant had agreed to enhanced streetscape, enhanced landscaping, and some sustainability requirements regarding electronic vehicles charging stations. Were some of the enhancements that that the developer agreed to for this one. Local hire is on that list of sort of menu of rankable options, but it's not currently not a requirement to have local hire or local contracting.
I'd like to go back to the administration, Ms. Nair or Mr. Rael, if you could just comment regarding that question. I think it's important that we start considering local hiring, especially for our contractors as we move forward.
Madam President and members of the council, we certainly can look at how we might incorporate some of those provisions on these contracts. Keep in mind that these are proposals that, as you all know, are challenging to build in some of these particular areas just because of the economics of the community or the areas that we're building in. But we can certainly look at providing some incentives for local hiring. We certainly want to make sure that our local businesses, men and women, have access to these programs as we build these projects out.
I would strongly encourage us to look at local hiring in the future as when you're reviewing your RFPs as maybe a provision that would give them an additional point or something like that, because we want to encourage our population to go back to work. So as we move forward types of issues, or if we have any amendments to this particular project, I would definitely encourage that we start considering our local hiring option. Any other comments by councilors? If not, we will then, Councilor Benton, would you like to close?
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, Madam President. Yeah, this is another phase of a large master plan development. I do appreciate the questions and your support, Madam President, for continuing to look at what we can do with these projects. Again, they are MR areas for a reason, which is that they're typically, as Mr. Riles stated, tougher than just building out on a green field somewhere. Many more challenges, many more stakeholders surrounding the projects. But beyond that, they're economically challenging. So we need to, talking about striking a balance with regard to other things, we need to try to strike a balance there and get as close as we can to, whether it's through these point systems when they're competitive projects, to encourage local hiring, certainly encourage, living wages outside of just the legislated living wage, but a true living wage. I mean, there's all those discussions, right? And we're all well aware of them, and we need to keep that in the forefront. But this has been a remarkable project in terms of its success, and it is really nice to see 225 new dwelling units. We're talking about our regional economy, and there's not much more room for Albuquerque within the city limits to be just building low density development. We've got to find places like this and opportunities like this to infill with both affordable, which I'm a big advocate for, but also just market rates. So all these discussions about equity and local spin-offs from the development are really important. So thanks for that.
And Madam President, if I might add to Councilor Benton's comments and thank Karen Iverson and her staff. They've done a really great job on many of these projects. This is another one example of their dedicated hard work. And I think it's important just to recognize staff when they do good work, and they certainly put in a lot of hours. So I just want to let you all know we appreciate that.
I agree, Councilor and Mr. Rael and Ms. Iverson. Thank you for the work that you've done. I think it's really important that, as we put these incentives, the city puts incentives like impact fee waivers and, tax abatement, et cetera, that we do look at local incentives. And, we've been talking in our community about people having difficulty going back to work because they're getting too comfortable on unemployment. But we also need to consider, if we're putting in all of these sorts of incentives as a community, that we ensure that our local economy is supported. And that's why I raised the issue. So thank you, Karen. You won't believe I worked on this on Sycamore many years ago, and I won't even say how long ago that was. But I think these are, the other day I was watching the news with my mother, and she asked me about the Ronald McDonald House, and she said, well, what is that? And I said, that's a really great benefit that's offered to people that are struggling. And so this whole area has really, I think it's come a long ways. And, I think the vision back then, 20, 30 years ago, 30 years ago, is coming to fruition. And I think it's great to see that. So with that, councilors, if there aren't any other, I see Councilor Pena has a comment or question.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to, just for clarifying purposes, I just wanted to say that I know you made a comment about, some folks not wanting to go to work because they were on unemployment or just not wanting to. I just think that's just one side of the story. So if we could just clarify the record, just to know that, there could be other circumstances behind people that they haven't returned to work. Thank you, Madam President.
Well, I only thank you for bringing that to light, Councilor. That's what was on the news the other night. So I was just repeating what was on the news, but thank you for raising that issue. I think the point was really that, we want to ensure that as we give benefits to developers and developments, that we ensure that our local, employment base can take advantage of those benefits.
Thank you, Madam President. I agree with you. I knew you didn't, maybe I shouldn't say, I don't know what you intended to say, but I know you didn't intend to say that people aren't returning to work for that reason. So I just wanted to.
No, actually what I was trying to say was that we want to ensure that benefits are available to people who want to return to work, and that through local hiring or.
Yeah, perfect. And I agree with the other statements. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, are there any other comments? If not, Ms. Ortega, would you like to take a vote on this?
Yes, ma'am. Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0.
Thank you, counselors. That passes on a 9-0 vote. We look forward to a really wonderful development, Ms. Iverson, and to the administration and Counselor Benson's district. So we will move on to item D, which is Counselor Sena, and this is R132. Counselor Sena.
Thank you, Madam President. R132 is a nuisance substandard dwelling or structure in need of abatement at 5912 Sweetwater Drive Northwest within the city limits of Albuquerque is so ruined, damaged, and dilapidated as to be a menace to the public comfort, health, peace, or safety, and that it is to be required to be removed. I move a beautiful.
Counselor Sena, do I have a second? I have a second from Counselor Bassan. Are there any?
Madam President, if I can have Director Williams give an update on this property.
I almost called you Counselor Williams. Mr. Williams.
Madam President, thank you. Counselor Sena, as you mentioned, this request concerns a property at 5912 Sweetwater Drive Northwest. It's an abandoned, vacant, substandard property that's been worked by our Code Enforcement Division since April of 2015. There are 16 existing liens that are currently filed against the property for various board up and cleanup work necessary to ensure that the property meets minimum property maintenance standards. Those 16 liens result in about $7,500 in total costs against the site. Code enforcement has worked tirelessly over the years to get communication or get some sort of discussion with the property owner, who's an out-of-state property owner. But despite all of those efforts, they still don't have anybody to talk to give them a plan to get this property back into productive use. They last inspected the site late last week, Thursday of last week, and again found that the property remains boarded. Certain doors and windows of the property are boarded. The yard does meet minimum standards, but the landscaping has died and things of that nature. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Williams? Counselor Sena.
Yes, thank you, Director Williams. And I also want to thank your staff, Vinny and Rob and Chris, also gave me an update on this earlier in the day. And, you know, I am trying to give every option available to the property owners, you know, really hoping that we can have another situation like Everett as a result of this. And I understand that through this process, the property owners can always stop it by really addressing some of these concerns that we have and some liens that we have placed on the property. And because of that, just through the public health emergency, understanding that the property owners don't live here, I'm going to give them one more chance to really come to council to address the property itself. I know that myself will actually be driving out to the property to take a look, because neighbors have been raising this as an issue since I believe 2015 is where Elaine pulled back some of the emails. So I'm going to move for a deferral till May 17th to give the property owners one last attempt to respond to council or come before council to address it.
Thank you, Counselor Sena. Do I have a second on that deferral? I have a second from Counselor Pena. So with that motion for deferral, we will move on to the vote. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral.
Thank you, counselors. That passes on a 9-0 vote, so that will be deferred to May the 17th. Our next item is item E. This is Counselor Benton, R135.
Thank you, Madam President. R135 is a nuisance substandard dwelling or structure in need of abatement at 1717 Edith Boulevard Southeast within the city limits. So ruin, damage, dilapidated is to be a menace to public comfort, health, peace, or safety that is to be required to be removed. I move a do pass.
Thank you, Counselor Benton. You have a second from Counselor Bassan.
And Madam President, we had a last minute request from the property owner who had reasons that they could not be here. I'll just ask planning department or Mr. Williams or whoever to speak to that, but I'm willing to consider a deferral on this as well. I think some unexpected circumstances that they wanted to be here but could not.
Mr. Williams, would you like to comment?
Madam President, thank you. As Councilor Benton mentioned, code enforcement has heard recently from the owner. Very quickly, this is a vacant, abandoned substandard property that's been in its condition and worked by code enforcement since July of 2015. There are 6 liens against the property totaling $4,300 for board up and cleanup work. The site was visited late last week, still found to be in that condition, but as Councilor Benton noted, the owner has come forward. This is a silver lining, if you will. We've got somebody that's stepping forward. The information provided to code enforcement was that the owner had intended on giving or deeding this property to a family member, and apparently that has not worked out. But the owner is interested in either selling the property or getting it back into productive use. So we would not be opposed, or we would be in agreement and appreciate the opportunity, as mentioned by Councilor Benton, to defer this matter to allow us to continue to work with the owner to hopefully bring about a successful resolution to this.
So,
Councilor Benton, is 2
yeah,
weeks adequate time?
Madam President, I guess I'll ask Director Williams. I mean, it sounds as though there's some movement. I'd be willing to defer this till the first meeting in June, if you think that would give a little bit more wiggle room for you and your staff. And but we will. I mean, it's a long time, 2015, for the neighborhood to be, and the department and the city to be expending resources on this. But I'm willing to do that. So I'll go ahead and move that, Madam President, to the first meeting in.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. We have a motion, and I'll second that motion to move this to June 7th meeting. Is that agreeable, Councilor Benton?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to move R135 to June 7th. And I will go on to Ms. Ortega for the vote.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0 on the deferral.
Thank you, councilors. That item is deferred to June the 7th. Counselor Davis, R141.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just pulling this up here so we can have it. Item R21-141 calls for additional community input and good neighbor measures by the city for the proposed new Gateway Center at the former Loveless Hospital site on Gibson. I'm happy to talk more about it, and I believe we have a brief amendment requested by the administration, but first I would move a do pass.
We have a second by Counselor Gibson, it appears.
Thanks. Sorry, motion for approval.
And
Do we have any comments from any counselors regarding this? Counselor
And-
Gibson.
So
Counselor Gibson. And was that a second or is that a question?
Both.
Okay, Councilor Gibson, go ahead.
So, Councilor Davis, I'm very supportive of this. I think you know what your district needs and you know, to make this happen. So, but I would like to ask you about the meeting that you all had and its success.
Well, Councilor Gibson, we haven't had any meetings yet. We've had some small neighborhood meetings, but the administration has been working diligently with the neighborhood associations to schedule a more formal process to be able to capture the right information. And that's part of this this process. And while I have you, I just might mention that, yes, it is important for my district in particular, but I might remind us all that it's important for all of our districts because these gateway centers are supposed to be neighborhood sized, meaning we're going to have a lot more of them downtown on the west side and in the Heights coming soon. So whatever we do in Southeast will be the model for the one coming soon near you.
Absolutely. And I'm totally in agreement with you. This is a citywide issues, actually. So I apologize. We had passed your resolution a couple of weeks ago, as I recall. And I guess I made the assumption that one had been scheduled and perhaps it had already occurred. So you don't have one scheduled yet. The city administration hasn't yet scheduled one. Is that correct?
Madam President, Councilor Gibson, I know the administration is here and available to answer, but the short answer is we're working diligently on that. They've contacted all of the impacted neighborhood associations. We've had one-on-one meetings with some of them, but the administration is doing a great job of trying to find scheduling. And as you can imagine, scheduling 5 and 6 neighborhoods with the right people at the right time is a little harder nowadays. But I'm absolutely confident they're going to get that done here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm not throwing blame at the administration. I'm just wondering, you know, how far along it was. So thank you very much.
We have a question from Councilor Bassan.
Thank you, Madam President. I had some conversations with the administration today regarding this proposed bill, and I think that they were able to put my mind at ease because I definitely am all for community input, but I also am recognizing that we are at a point in our city that we can't wait to do something either. So we have to find, again, that balance that we were just talking about earlier. So I found out that this, while getting community input, there's still other things that are going to be happening at the Gateway Center in addition to RFPs, different proposals, some design, construction. So while the administration is talking to the community about what is important to them, we also will be working on and continuing getting ready to open so that we can start helping these people in need that are plaguing and causing their own peril in this city. We have homeless, drug addicted, mentally ill, and they need treatment and they need help. And we have to be able to provide it to them, like Councilor Davis said, in his district and then in all of our districts so that we can help everyone everywhere. So my one question, now that I got that off because I was really concerned about that earlier today. My one question is on page 2, lines 8 through 12, it's the second bullet really where it says kicks off or advances discussions toward additional components of a good neighbor agreement by the city. And then it continues to go on. I recognize that I've seen a potential amendment that's coming through, but at the same time, how do we know when this is done, when it says kicks off or advances? When do we decide that we're done if we're just kicking off and advancing discussions? Because to me, there's really not an end time frame to that. Maybe nor should there be.
Madam President,
Davis, do you want to respond to that?
Sure, I can. Madam President, Councilor Bassan, thanks for that question. And Madam President, this might be a good segue into our amendment after we get to Councilor Benton's question, but you're absolutely right, Councilor Bassan. We talked with the administration about being sure the language was flexible enough to allow us to continue to go ahead and pull building permits, for example, to do the necessary renovation to prepare the spaces for whomever the final tenants will be. And that's an important piece of this process that we know is ongoing. There are already more than 100 people receiving overnight care for medical and behavioral health issues at that location without causing any neighborhood impact. And we want those to continue. And this would allow that to happen. But the legislation itself only contemplates a pause for 45 days to complete those 2 series of meetings, present that plan to the neighborhood before applying for any conditional use to the city council. That's consistent with our plan that we talked about in the budget a few weeks ago that would have the first tenants being available or the first operating dollars available in July. So it's a tight timeline, but we recognize that, and the budget sort of asked us to get this done by then, and this certainly would allow that.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Councilor Davis, for the clarification and agreement that we can't continue to wait. We have to work together and proceed.
Okay, we have a question from Councilor Benton.
Yes, Madam President, just quickly agree with the statement about that actually 45 days is pretty expeditious as it goes with regard to city notification and community outreach on something like this. So I think that's totally reasonable. But I did see Director Pierce waving her hand, and now I just see her still image, but I think she's still there. So I wondered if she would like to speak.
Director Pierce, I didn't see you because you didn't have your screen on.
Council President Borrego and Councilor Benton and Councilor Davis. Well, I was going to just add, and it's fine. I wanted to add that the neighborhood engagement has begun, and while not facilitated meetings, we've had 2 very great neighborhood meetings last week. And we do see these as really essential to the whole process, where we are including somebody that's taking notes, as well as just working very closely with the neighborhoods. We're working hard to get other neighborhood meetings set up, and just haven't got those set up. We're having some continued challenges just getting on people's calendars, and some don't have presidents currently, but we're continuing to be diligent. We think it's important, which kind of even precedes Councilor Davis's legislation. We think neighborhood conversations and building those relationships are essential, and have appreciated what we've done so far, and appreciate those neighborhoods surrounding Gibson. That was what I was going to add. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question, Director Pierce? Just how many neighborhoods are we talking about?
City Council President Borrego, we've got about, I want to say 5 neighborhoods that directly surround, I would say, Gibson Medical Center, and we've met with 2 of the 5 of those. We also have a meeting scheduled with the District 6 Coalition, so that is scheduled for early May, which here we are in May, and that represents the leadership of all the neighborhoods there in District 6. So that is scheduled as well.
Thank you for clarifying that, Director. Any other questions of Director Pierce? Councilors? Any other questions related to this legislation? Councilor Davis to close?
Actually, Madam President, I believe we have an amendment, and if Mr. Moya has it available, I know it was a little late in the day today, and so I was hoping he could share that with us just so we could all have it. And then, of course, if the administration, Mr. Real, wants to weigh in, we can do that. So we'll tee him up if he needs to. But floor amendment number 1 would replace those line items that Councilor Bassan mentioned part of on page 2, lines 21 through 24. The new section 2, this is the thing that shall happen or not happen. The city shall not issue a certificate of occupancy or a conditional use permit for the Gateway Center until the 2 community input sessions have occurred and the Good Neighbor program described in section 1 above has been completed. Essentially, this is addresses the concerns Councilor Bassan and some of the administration had brought, that ensures that we can do the required maintenance and work on the facility without allowing new contractors or nurse service organizations to take over until we finish this process. I would move floor amendment number 1.
Okay.
I would second
Is there
that.
a second regarding that? Councilor Bassan? Councilor Jones, was that a second also?
Yes, ma'am.
I think yours was first. So Counselor Jones and then Counselor Bassan. Okay, are there any questions related to floor amendment number 1?
Madam President,
Bassan?
Madam President,
Counselor Bassan? You need to unmute, Counselor Bassan.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I was hearing Mr. Rael and you, I think, at the same time. I would like to just confirm that when we say on this amendment that nothing will happen in section 2, like we won't issue any of these permits until section 1 has been deemed complete. This goes back to my concern about this kicks off or advances discussion towards additional components of a good neighbor agreement by the city with area residents and businesses to be in place for so long as the Gateway Center operates at this location. This discussion will at minimum address, and then it goes on to list stuff. How do we know when that discussion is completed in order to satisfy section 2 of this resolution?
Counselor Davis?
Madam President, Counselor Bassan, I think we can't just read that one section in isolation. It says that we have to have 2 meetings within 45 days and that the input will be taken. There's no requirement that, at any point in this process that the administration would have to satisfy all of the requests of every neighbor from all those different groups, but they are required to have the meetings to take the input. And that way, when they present the conditional use application to the zoning hearing officer or to this city council, ultimately, we can evaluate, or the hearing officer can evaluate whether they've tried to accommodate as many of those requests and concerns as possible. So it's about having the meetings in the 45-day timeline. Ultimately, that'll be the decision of the administration as to how they incorporate those.
Madam President, may I follow up?
Counselor Bassan, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification, Counselor Davis. I think that is making it a more streamlined approach with saying that within 45 days, 2 community meetings have to begin to kick off or advance discussions, including all of the following that is listed. Am I on the right track?
Madam President, that's correct. We're not assuming that in the language that we want to kick off the discussions, we assume there will always be discussions always happening with our neighbors. But we wanted a formal place to start and to be sure that those things the conversations and the questions needed to be addressed early.
Thank you for making sure that that's clear for me. I appreciate it.
Any other questions of the council?
I think Mr. Rael wanted to mention something, Madam President.
Mr. Rael, are you available?
Madam President, can you hear me?
Yes.
Madam President and Councilor Davis, thanks for working with us on this amendment. Our goal was, to Councilor Bassan's point, wanted to make sure that we can continue to do some of the work that needs to happen in the facility as we are going through this process. And we'll be, all of this will be on a parallel track, right? We'll be working with the neighborhoods, getting the neighborhood agreement put together at the same time we're having these meetings. But also equally as important, the way the bill was originally written, we had some concerns that we would not be able to issue any permits for any remodeling or any work that needs to be done just to satisfy the current operations that are in the building today. This amendment that Councilor Davis put forth gives us that flexibility so that we can keep moving forward and achieve hopefully everyone's intended goals here as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Rael. Just a quick question. The meetings are facilitated meetings, are they not?
Madam President and members of the council, yes, we will have facilitated meetings with the neighborhoods.
So would the council be receiving those reports?
We will certainly keep the council in the loop as we move forward. Obviously, as with any other meeting, you all are welcome to attend and give us your perspectives.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Rael. We appreciate that. Okay, are there any other questions of councilors regarding this particular item, R141? Councilor Davis, would you like to close?
Urge your support.
Okay, we will move on to Ms. Ortega. Vote?
Yes, and just to clarify, this will be a vote for floor amendment number 1.
Yes.
Councilor Bassan?
Yes.
Councilor Benton?
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0 on floor amendment 1.
Okay, counselors, floor amendment number 1, we only had one floor amendment on this. Counselor Davis, I'll return to you on R141, the original bill.
R141 as amended, Madam President, I urge your support.
Okay, and we did have a second from Counselor Jones on that. So unless there are any other questions, we will move on to the vote. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Benton,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
9-0 on R141 as amended.
Thank you, counselors. R141 passes on a 9-0 vote. We will move on to R142. Counselor Davis.
Thank you, Madam President, and thanks to the council for your support on our last piece. I hope this one goes as smoothly as well. R142 adopts a policy to create a safe harbor for victims of domestic violence and other victims of violence to engage with APD without fear of arrest. Council, well, first let me move R142.
I'll second.
Counselor Davis, we have a second from Counselor Jones.
Thank you, ma'am. We've had some discussion about this in public, and let me give a very brief update. I see that there's a camera staring at the ceiling in APD's conference room, which I believe means there's someone from the police department with us. But Madam President, this is an issue that we've talked about at the City Council and run into in the last few months during our own conversations. As it happens, we found that there's evidence that individuals who may be victims of domestic violence may fear reporting it to law enforcement because they have unrelated old warrants or unrelated minor criminal activity that could put them in jeopardy of being arrested, say on a warrant that may not address some of the violence issues. It's articulated much more succinctly and well done in the legislation, and certainly we can talk about it. But this is an important piece. When Chief Medina and I began looking around the country to see how other agencies were addressing this, we found that everyone is best practice now avoids arresting both persons involved in a domestic violence incident, for example, and in fact tells the officers to figure out who the primary aggressor is and to provide aid and assistance to the victim. But what happened in at least one instance, and we believe in several others based on victim advocates' testimonies, is that in times when someone may have an old warrant, they may have a small amount of drugs on their person, some non-violent activities, or not paid a fine on an old case because they couldn't afford to, they may be reluctant to call APD because they feel they may be a victim of violence, may be arrested for those old warrants. And so this would be a new policy. It would direct APD to develop a new policy with our criminal justice partners to create a safe harbor for those victims. I see APD is here, and to put everyone's at ease, Councilor Bassan had a number of amendments, and we've had a chance to discuss them, and I think we can dispense with two of those fairly quickly as fairly friendly amendments, thanks to some productive conversations today. But perhaps the president would like to let APD address, I think that's Chief Medina there, in this issue before we do.
I would, and I'm going to go to APD, and I would like for you to introduce yourself, please, officer.
Madam President, Councilor Davis, this is Chief Medina with APD here in the conference room.
I can't see you, Chief. I'm sorry.
We were having some technical issues with our camera, but I think we got it figured out.
Thank you. Go ahead.
You know, I spoke to Councilor Davis about this legislation. It's something that we already do in a lot of ways informally. As officers go through their career, our Chief of Staff, Cecily Barker, was part of those units that worked domestic violence cases. And a lot of times they even drove individuals to the courts to get these cases cleared up so that they would be able to report these cases. I think this is just really formalizing some processes and looking at some other processes and putting it in a way that we could ensure that we always protect victims and ensure that they're not in fear of reporting these. Even I was shocked when I read the journal article and it talked about the advocates receiving up to 500 phone calls a week for a variety of issues and individuals asking questions. There's a lot of victims out there that have questions. This may not answer every question, but it's definitely a step in the right direction to start getting early answers to some of those 500 people who call and ask questions on how they could protect themselves and how they could get out of that cycle.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the chief? Counselors? Nope. Thank you, Chief. I guess apparently not. I'll go back to Counselor Davis on your floor amendments.
Madam President, I believe they're Councilor Bassan's amendments, and so I'll let her present them. The first one I think is a friendly amendment.
I'm sorry, Counselor Bassan. These are your amendments.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to move floor amendment 1 on page 2, lines 12 through 19, amend subsection A as follows. Work with the city's criminal justice system partners to evaluate options for, and to the extent feasible, institute a safe harbor policy or operating procedure that allows victims to report incidents of domestic violence or sexual assault against them. And then it continues on with what was previously written. The explanation of this is because this amendment proposes to recognize that while a safe harbor policy should be evaluated, the city and its partners in the criminal justice system might ultimately determine that such a policy, as contemplated by this resolution, just might not be feasible. So I think that rather than having the word in there saying that we will guarantee and institute this, I think that it's important that we evaluate it. And if it's feasible, we can go ahead and institute.
Madam President, I'll second that amendment, and it's a friendly amendment, but I know we have to vote on it.
Thank you, Counselor Davis. So we have floor amendment number 1, as discussed by Counselor Bassan and seconded by Counselor Davis. Are there any questions from the council regarding floor amendment number 1? I don't hear any and I don't see any. So we will move on to the vote for floor amendment number 1. Ms. Ortega. Oh, Counselor Gibson. I saw your hand raised.
Yes, I'm sorry. It took me a while to think about that. I guess my question on this amendment would be, what kind of scenario or what kind of conditions might be present that would not enable us, not allow us to institute a safe harbor policy? I don't quite understand that. So maybe.
I wonder if the chief could answer that question.
Madam President, if I may respond to that, please, and what the intention is behind this amendment.
Counselor Bassan.
Thank you. Counselor Gibson, the reason that I wanted to make sure to clarify that we can't just institute something is because our criminal justice partners involve the courts and involve the DA's office and the public defenders, as you all know, but we can't just demand that we institute something when they are in charge of their own purview and powers, and we don't have that right. We have to work together to have a compromise, and we have to agree upon it once they agree upon it, because we can't just say all of a sudden, Judge, you're in charge of doing this now.
Yeah, I get you. I understand it. It's a polite way of inviting them into this. I get it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Gibson. Counselor Bassan, thank you for responding. Are there any other questions regarding floor amendment number 1? All right, then we will go to the vote. Ms. Ortega.
Counselor Bassan.
Yes.
Counselor Benton. Counselor Benton is excused. He indicated he had to leave the meeting. Counselor Davis.
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Peña,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
8-0.
Thank you, counselors. That passes on an 8-0 vote with Counselor Benton leaving at this time. So we will go to floor amendment number 2. And that one is, are we going to hear that? Counselor Bassan?
Thank you, Madam President. Floor amendment number 2 is different than what's in our iPads. I have since talked with Counselor Davis, and we've tried to recreate an amendment that I think would be a good compromise for us, with the intention of why I was doing my amendment to begin with and what his intention is on this policy in the first place. So going back to, we're going to have to, my apologies to the staff for having to work through this with us. But it would be on page 2, on line 17, insert a period after the word them, and then strike the rest. I'm going slow for everyone. And then do a new section B that would say, work with the city's criminal justice system partners on determining which pending felony warrants, comma, if any, can be included in the safe harbor policy. I'm going to ask if Counselor Davis, does that sound like what we had discussed?
It does, Counselor Bassan, and with that, I would offer a second.
Thank you.
Okay, just for clarification, because we do not have that in front of us, Counselor Bassan, could you repeat that?
Yes,
please?
ma'am. Madam President, it would be on page 2, on line 17, insert a period after the word them and strike the rest. And then do a new section B that would state, work with the city's criminal justice system partners on determining which pending felony warrants, if any, can be included in the safe harbor policy. And then I guess technically we would have to also add into the amendment that B and C are now labeled C and D.
Okay, so just for the record, counselors, you do not have that amendment in front of you, and we do not have that available to show on the screen. So we have a motion and a second, and unless there's any discussion, Counselor Bassan?
Madam President, I would like to explain this amendment and the reasoning behind it, please. Thank you. The reasoning behind this amendment, I think that felony warrants are a very serious offense, typically speaking, but Counselor Davis pointed out that there are potentially some exceptions to the rule. So I think that it was very hard for me to swallow the idea of saying that we won't arrest for any felony warrants, but when it was brought to my attention that there were some other potential felony warrants that might not be as serious as a violent crime or something in that nature, I think that it's important for the criminal justice system partners to work in conjunction with APD to determine if there are any felony warrants that could actually be included in this policy.
Thank you, Counselor Bassan. Counselor Davis?
Thank you, ma'am. And I just want to thank Counselor Bassan for working with us on this. And really the reason that I wanted to be sure we get a chance to have this work group or whoever it is that ultimately works out this policy, as Counselor Bassan pointed out, because things like possession of drugs, for example, are technically felonies, but we're not even arresting folks on the street for that right now on a general basis, everyday basis. And so there are some felonies that we would not necessarily consider to be serious impediments, and that could be worked out in other ways. And we want this work group to look at that. I think there's a common agreement that serious violent felonies have some obligation, but the police department is doing a good job, and we want to give them that flexibility, and this language would do that.
Thank you, Counselor Davis. Any other comments? I would state that I would support that, Counselor Bassan. I think it seems like a very reasonable, and I know you and I had some discussion about this earlier, so I definitely think it's a reasonable alternative. Any other questions from any other counselors? I don't see any other questions, so we will call that floor amendment number 2, as I indicated earlier, and we will move to Ms. Ortega for the vote.
Counselor Bassan,
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
Yes.
Counselor Gibson,
Yes.
Counselor Harris,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Counselor Pena,
Yes.
Counselor Sena,
Yes.
Counselor Borrego,
Yes.
8-0 with Counselor Benton excused.
Thank you, counselors. Passes on an 8-0 vote with Counselor Benton not being available. We will move on now to floor amendment number 3. And I believe this is also Counselor Bassan. Counselor Bassan.
Thank you, Madam President. I move amendment number 3 to R142 on page 1, strike lines 18 through 20. Whereas the same study found that 1 in 4 female survivors of domestic violence who had called police would not do so again, and 1 in 2 were unsure about whether they would involve police again. And my reasoning for this, oh, well, I guess I need a second first.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second from Counselor Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. My reasoning for this is and thank you, Counselor Jones. My reasoning is when you put this in conjunction with all of the other whereas clauses, it doesn't indicate if people that have been, that if 1 in 4 female survivors of domestic violence or 1 in 2 were unaware or unsure about if they were going to call or not, it doesn't indicate, are they doing that and saying that because of interactions with the police department, or is that due to any other multitude of reasons that could be out there, like maybe the threat of their abuser? And I think that when we're talking about a policy that we're trying to write and push forward that can go ahead and involve whether or not this is going to implicate police further, we need to make sure that we are very clear on what is the reasoning behind whether or not people are unsure if they want to interact or call the police department again in regards to this.
Are there any questions? Counselor Gibson, Counselor Davis. Counselor Gibson?
Okay, thank you, Madam President. So I guess what comes to my mind immediately in hearing your proposed amendment is that no matter what the reason is, I don't care what the reason is. I think that if this does what we hope it will do, if it's passed tonight, will make it a little bit easier, comfortable. I'm not quite sure what the word is, encouraging women and men really to report assaults. So I don't think that the reason why they are or are not likely to report again to any police agency is, I don't think that's really germane here. But thanks for the other 2 amendments. Those are pretty good ones. I'm not in favor of this one, though. I'm not a big fan. Thank you.
Counselor Davis?
Thank you, Madam President. I'll make this quick. I concur with Counselor Gibson. I don't read it in such a way that it blames police. I think it just recognizes the data that's been presented from our advocates. And one of the things we can do to encourage a better relationship between victims and law enforcement is to encourage them to report. And so I would oppose this amendment, though I do think those other 2 were excellent. Thank you.
Counselor Sena, and then Counselor Pena.
Thank you, Madam President. I share similar sentiments. I know that the whereases typically are just quoting facts. I'm interested, I was pulling up in looking and reading this legislation, the study itself as well. I agree that, we're trying to make it easier and more community oriented in people's approach with our police, especially when it comes to domestic violence And so I think that really it's also numbers and figures that we should be aware of as well as counselors, so that we can think through better policies to help and support those men and women who choose to not go to police. You know, there's also restorative justice practices as well that people can engage in as well. So I just think it's important for us to have these numbers.
Thank you, Councillor Sena. Councillor Pena? Councillor Pena, you're muted.
Thank you, Madam President. From our staff, I don't know who can answer some of my questions. If we can pull the amendment up one more time. Okay, so on a whereas, it actually says, so it actually involves a statement. It doesn't have like where it's from. Can we cite the study of where it comes? And then is it just really, I mean, a whereas is a statement, but it seems like the statement's not completed. So it says the same study found, oh, so it references a study earlier on. Okay, I didn't catch that. That 1 in 4. Okay. Okay. I think I guess it references the study. I guess what I would ask the staff, it references the study that's referenced within the resolution already. Is that correct?
Madam President, Councilor Pena, yes, that is correct. It's kind of hard to flip back and forth between the bill and the amendment, but in context, that study is referenced in the bill on page 1, line 12, whereas a study by the University of Kentucky and the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and then it lists a statistic, and then this subsequent whereas lists another statistic from that same study.
So it's basically just another declaration within the resolution.
Madam President, Councilor Pena, yeah, I think that's the right way to think about it. It's a statement about how the findings of that study are interpreted and being relied upon, I guess, for context of this resolution.
So is there any way to add to that amendment just to say that this and other findings within the study should be, I don't know, analyzed? Or I'm just saying that, you know, because Councilor Bassan's statement is that, you know, we don't know why, whether it's for whatever reason, right? And although I have my own personal opinions of why people don't report stuff, can we reference something to that effect that just says, because there's other statements within the study that aren't answered. It's just kind of like, you know, if some people don't, some people do, just like any of the, I guess, whether it's during their polling or whatever it is they do. Does that make sense? Or did I not make any sense?
Are you asking for clarification on that, Mr. Melendres? Can you? Or
Madam President, Councilor Pena, I'm obviously, you know, if you'd like to propose an amendment that suggests that that study be analyzed in implementing this, or that the city and its law enforcement partners also evaluate that study, then that's something that you could propose. I mean, that could be proposed in a couple of ways, as a amendment to the amendment that's on the floor, or as a separate subsequent amendment. You know, I think to help you maybe formulate kind of where you're going, the outcome of this resolution is that the city is going to direct the city to essentially study this question a bit more. And in that context, if you would like that analysis to be done together with additional review of this particular study or others, then that is certainly an amendment that you could propose.
I think it may be muddying the waters a little bit, but I do know, like, it's a declaration within the study, so it's not anything that would hurt the resolution or the intent of the resolution. So maybe I'll just leave it alone. Thank you for helping me through that. I'm not able to look at my stuff because I'm tethering now because of my internet. I can't get my other documents. So, you know, life on Zoom. Thank you, Mr. Melendres.
Counselor Bassan, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. Maybe I can offer a little bit more insight as to why this was important to me and then use that as a close if there's no further discussion about it. But I recognize that with what Counselor Gibson was saying earlier about how it really doesn't matter the details of why people are afraid to call for help. It matters that the people are afraid to call for help. And I completely and entirely agree with that. And we need to work on finding ways to help victims so that they are no longer victimized and that we can assist them with that. That being said, I think that it's very important that while we're sitting here and I think Counselor Davis, you said something that you said that APD is doing a good job and we should give them flexibility on that. I think that in the same breath, we cannot say and put something in a resolution as a whereas clause that could implicate that APD is actually the reason why people aren't calling when they're victims. And that to me is how I read this. So I feel like our men and women in blue there's many, many good ones out there and they are losing their morals and they're losing their the morale that's supporting them. I'm sorry. I think it's very important that we boost them up and we make sure that we're clear on what we're saying and what we're doing, while also trying to make sure to ensure that victims are no longer victimized. And I guess with that, I urge your support.
Okay, so, and I see Counselor Sena, and Counselor Sena, I apologize, but the last time that you spoke, we could barely hear you. So could you speak up a little bit more?
Thank you, Madam President. I'll sit a little bit closer to the mic. I think that in thinking through this statement, it's not necessarily an issue where survivors don't wish to choose to support our officers by not reporting to our police. I understand what Counselor Bassan's trying to get at in her amendment, that I do agree, of course, that we don't completely always understand why each victim or survivor of domestic violence may not want to come forward. And I think that through the Safe Harbor bill, through Counselor Davis's bill, is trying to work that out exactly. That sometimes they do not wish to come forward because maybe they do have an issue or some history with our officers, but that's certainly not always the case. I just bring this up through my own personal experience. Although I'm not a survivor of domestic violence, I am of sexual abuse. However, I chose not to go to police and I chose the social restorative justice practice instead. Because that I understand that over criminalization, especially of communities of colors, and bringing it forward to a court may not always bring justice for myself. That's just my own personal experience. I can only talk about why I chose not to. And it's something that other communities, whether it's our LGBTQ communities or other communities of color in their own experience, and sometimes maybe even lack of experience, that there is that fear of not knowing how to report or what may happen. And I think that's why this clause from the study is just important to me, that sometimes people choose not to go to police and they choose other means, whether it's the legal route or not, such as myself. But again, I think it's just a statement from the study that indicated that not all survivors of domestic violence choose to go that route, and we should be able to understand it. I would love to see a study that's more locally done, or statements from local advocate groups that do focus on why, and they receive some of these victims and survivors, and they understand the complexity and nuances of why people do report or don't. And I think that's why, I'm going to not support this, but that does not mean that I don't support our officers. I think that we should make it on our end as policymakers easier for them to feel comfortable to report to our officers. And I think we're getting there through community policing and some more relationship building. But I think it's just important for us to understand that not everyone chooses to report to officers. And we should think that through a little bit more. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sena. Are there any other comments from councillors regarding this particular amendment? Thank you for offering this up, Councillor Bassan. We will move to the vote. Ms. Ortega.
Councillor Bassan.
Yes.
Councillor Davis.
No.
Councillor Gibson. Councillor Gibson.
Councillors, we seem to have lost Councillor Gibson.
Councillor Gibson. Okay. Councillor Harris.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Pena.
Yes.
Councillor Sena.
No.
Councillor Borrego.
Yes. And Councillor Gibson is back with us.
Okay. Councillor Gibson.
I'm sorry, I had to run out for just a moment. So we're voting on the amendment, correct?
Amendment 3.
My vote is no. Thank you.
5-3, motion passes.
Thank you, councillors. That motion passes on a 5-3 vote with Councillor Benton absent. And we will move on back to the original bill. And we will go to Councillor Davis. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam President. I know we've had a lot of discussion about this item. It's clearly one that the city thinks we ought to work on, and I appreciate the participation and the leadership of the police department in taking on this important issue with all of our criminal justice partners. So I urge your support.
Councillor Bassan, did you have a question?
Yes, Madam President, I'm sorry. I didn't realize we were skipping to a close. I was waiting to see how the amendments went before I asked further questions on the rest of this resolution. I have a few questions that I'd like to clarify, if that's all right.
Councillor Davis, if you would.
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Bassan, go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Thank you, Madam President. I want to know who's going to, I mean, I realize that like on the surface, it's the APD officer, but the officer gets to determine who's the victim in this crime, correct? So whether they're the victim of abuse or not, if at the scene, something happens and you have someone who is a domestic violence, apparently a domestic violence victim or a sexual abuse or assault victim, that later it come to find out they were actually one of the abusers and not a victim, but yet we aren't enforcing any kind of warrants. Have we considered liability towards the officer, and have we considered liability towards the entire department?
Madam President, I can address it. And of course, the police chief is our expert here, but let me just say, look, our police officers are trained every day to make these decisions, and this doesn't interfere with or impact their decision on how to decide who is the primary aggressor or not. We've evolved beyond what I was trained 20 years ago, which was just to arrest everybody and let the court sort it out later. Our officers do receive extensive training in this. That said, we're not simply ignore this directive. Is clear that it doesn't tell the police department to ignore other matters. It simply says that we're going to address the need for the victims on the scene and work out alternative ways to address those, whether it's presenting them to the court, scheduling a new hearing date, whatever it is they can work out. But again, our officers do this every day. Sometimes they make the wrong call, but more often than not, they know how to navigate those tough situations. And of course, if our police chief has other comments, Madam President, I would welcome them if you think they're helpful.
Madam President, Councillor Bassan, I think it's important that we recognize that our officers conduct an investigation on every scene. And there's going to be times when somebody's an offender, plus they have a warrant, and those individuals would still go to jail. But the ultimate call, whether somebody's going to be arrested or not, generally occurs during the call itself. It's very infrequent that there's not some type of resolution, although it does happen from time to time. And our officers will have to make that judgment call. I don't think it's very complicated. I mean, just as a matter of going back into the pandemic, we publicly stated that we wouldn't arrest anybody for misdemeanor warrants if we didn't have to because of the issues that were occurring at the jail. So it is something that we've even done in wider, wider used in the department. And in this matter, it's going to be something that's focusing on something that the officer would classify as a potential victim. And I think that kicking it back to our court to allow us to develop that policy with our partners is going to be key, because we should all work and get a final good product out of this that will work and answer any questions that may come up.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any other questions from counselors or discussion?
Yes, Madam President, I still have more.
Counselor Bassan.
Thank you. I think that with what Chief just said, it kind of sums up a lot of what I'm feeling and thinking right now in regards to when we're talking to our court system and what we need to encourage. I think that we need to really seriously encourage stressing to them about holding offenders accountable and keeping them in jail for the time that they need to be there, so that we can actually start enforcing laws and having some responsibility and accountability happen. I think that what I researched today and what I was looking at is, and I think from what I've heard, I was told this is the most current that is out there. If I'm wrong, my apologies, but as of April 26, 2018, the APD SOP 280 policy states that officers shall issue citations when appropriate in lieu of arrest on nonviolent misdemeanor offenses when there are no circumstances necessitating arrest. I recognize this isn't talking just about warrants, but this is talking about the discretion that officers have. And we're saying we're giving them discretion and we're trusting them. And yet in the same breath, we're creating potential legislation that's going to tell them, don't enforce laws while Albuquerque's in peril and crime is at its all-time high. You have a 1 in 2 chances of committing homicide in our city right now and getting away with it, because officers don't get to enforce laws. We're taking that away from them. And this is saying, if you have a warrant for your arrest, we're not going to arrest you. You're okay. I understand that people are victims and I am heartbroken by that and I want to help them. But I think that on which way are we going to have it? We're going to enforce laws or we're not going to enforce laws, because right now Albuquerque is like a dog chasing its tail when it comes to crime. And I can't blame our law enforcement for wanting to not enforce the laws at this point. So I'm super frustrated by it. I know it's coming across very clearly. I don't know what else to say. Do we want to support the good officers we have by allowing them to do the jobs that we're trusting them to do? Or do we want to take away that right and privilege and earned, trained responsibility from them when they're already doing it? So on page 2 of that same SOP, it says in section 6B, petty misdemeanor arrest authority. Officers shall issue citations when appropriate in lieu of arrest on nonviolent misdemeanor offenses, not to include DWIs when there are no circumstances necessitating an arrest. The next section, which I think is very relevant to this, says use of Metropolitan Court bonding window. Section 3 of that, officers can take an arrested person to the bonding window whenever they are arresting such individual for lower level warrants, such as for traffic or petty misdemeanor charges. This allows the person to pay fines or post a bond without having to be booked into MDC. So as of 2018, officers were indeed using this discretion, and they can still exercise that. And we heard from the chief and we heard from Councilor Davis already about how this is already there and this is making it official. Well, I think the SOP is quite official. So for all of the reasons that I have just stated, in addition to the fact that I thoroughly support our police department and the good officers that are on our street, I will not support this resolution, and I urge your support in not doing so as well.
Thank you, Councilor Bassan, and thank you for your empathy on this. I think it's a very difficult issue. I think officers are placed in a very difficult place when they respond to a domestic violence issue. And so what I see, Councilor Davis, did you want to respond to Councilor Bassan?
Madam President, I will, but Chief Medina, I believe, wanted to respond to Councilor Bassan's message there before we close.
Madam President, Councilor Bassan, you know, the one thing I think we need to start separating here is our officers do their job every day, and they arrest people every day. So it's not a matter of allowing them to do their job again. They're doing it every day. We can't keep people in custody, and we have to separate what are the crimes. And I think everybody did a good job in this, looking at this earlier, looking and saying which felonies we were going to keep, which felonies people shouldn't have an option. And I've spoken about this many times, that we need to draw a line in the sand. Some individuals need to stay in jail. Some individuals need to get help for underlying causes. And that's the direction we need to go. But if council wants to assist me in fixing the criminal justice system, where our officers arrest the same individuals over and over and over again, that are committing felonies like stealing cars, breaking into houses, those are the individuals that we have to do everything within our power to keep in custody. There are cases where officers are told that they have to issue citations. You read the SOPs, but the SOPs, what the SOPs don't state is, and we have our city attorneys here, is that is part of a court settlement agreement between the city of Albuquerque, the county, and the United States federal government on us arresting individuals. And it all goes back to our unequal treatment and arresting individuals who were homeless in the past. And Assistant City Attorney Lindsay Van Meter is here. She could address that settlement agreement and why that SOP is written that way and why the discretion was taken from our officers. The other part about a bonding window is we need to remember is victims of domestic violence generally, one of the biggest keys that their abusers use over them is the control of money and the fact that these people have no means to care for themselves. So saying alone a bonding window would address that issue and they would be able to go pay that bond is a lot of times unrealistic for individuals who are caught in these situations. So with that, with the permission, Madam President, we'll turn it over to the city Assistant City Attorney Lindsay Van Meter.
Ms. Van Meter.
Yes, Madam President and Councilor Bassan, you know, I believe that the chief addressed most of the important issues here, including the bonding window that may be part of the solution to not arresting individuals. However, as he mentioned, you know, there are financial restrictions from time to time with regard to that. What will be important will be working with the criminal justice partners to find out the best way to implement this policy. And I believe the amendment to add the language "if feasible" is very important. The reason that the city adopted those particular provisions that Councilor Bassan, you mentioned with regard to SOP, Standard Operating Procedure 280, was because of the settlement agreement. It's the McClendon settlement agreement. And there were concerns that, frankly, within the criminal justice system, there are already certain protections, including that the individuals, there's something called the misdemeanor arrest rule, which for many, many misdemeanors, APD cannot arrest unless they witnessed the misdemeanor occurring already. And so for that situation, it prevents officers from conducting an arrest and they must do a citation or summons. Then for, it's best to keep the jail population down by not arresting individuals on nonviolent misdemeanors. And that was the purpose of some of these other provisions, where the court would be required by state law to release those individuals within 24 hours or 48 hours at a hearing. So these types of bench warrants, particularly the unrelated pending or potential misdemeanor charges or warrants against them, are also likely to be warrants where the court would immediately release the individual, and an arrest is not going to accomplish much rather than just taking up the officer's time. So those are just important considerations with regard to SOP 280, and I can answer any other questions if council has any.
Madam President, Councilor Bazan, just to finish up, and I think this is important. This is a huge misunderstanding that the community needs to understand. And I love that we're able to have this discussion because our officers are out there every day doing their job, but they have limitations, whether they're limitations with the McClendon settlement or they're limitations with other circumstances or frustrations by our officers. They arrest the same individuals sometimes over and over. Auto theft knows exactly who they need to look at when certain cars are being stolen and to see if this person is in custody or out. And I hope that we could continue this conversation and ensure that we're doing everything we can to keep our city safe by ensuring that we work with the other members of the criminal justice system to make some of the modifications to the system that need to be made so that as a community, we draw a line in the sand when somebody needs to stay behind bars and in custody.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Ms. Van Meter. Councilor Bassan, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. I completely agree that a line needs to be drawn in the sand, and I agree that victims don't deserve to be victimized. I also agree that the criminal justice system, the courts, we need to stress on the courts to help us because APD is doing everything they can. I am agreeing with all of that. What I don't agree with is the insane crime rates in our city and the continual outcry of our community, not feeling safe, feeling completely left alone when really we're out here trying. APD is trying. But now we're going to say, here's another reason, APD, that you shouldn't be able to follow through on a job. And let's leave it to their discretion. It was there before. Why do we now have to work harder to say, do this while not doing that, and then expecting a different result? Because it's the definition of insanity, and I feel like that's where we're at in this city.
Thank you, Councilor Bassan. We have Councilor Gibson and Councilor Senna.
So thank you, Madam President. I just want to add something to this, is that I don't see this as an all or nothing. This is certainly not binary. And what makes me believe that because is in large part the word discretionary. I don't think that we're asking our police to do anything other than, more or less than, to do what they do best and use their good judgment. This bill, I believe, goes to helping putting people in jail for longer who need to be in jail for longer. So there's, we'll see a lot of things that come through our inboxes about activities that the different commands report. And many of those are, people get picked up for past felonies. Some of those felonies can simply be non-appearance, something that, in and of itself isn't a showstopper, in my opinion. But that's how they get picked up. So you can apply the same thing to the victims of sexual abuse. I really think that we need to, and I've said this over and over again, We should be letting cops do their work. They know their work better than we do. And I think that this bill will help them do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Senna, and then Councillor Pena.
Thank you, Madam President. I mean, I just want to get back to the heart of this bill, which is really our survivors of domestic violence. As the bill states, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 7 men in New Mexico have been victims of domestic violence. And so I want to get back to our, that we should not associate those survivors being the ones that's driving the crime in our city. These are survivors. And oftentimes I want to note that, especially for those that are in the realm of domestic violence, sometimes they're forced to do things, of course, that they do not wish to do, which is, if they are forced to go into sex work and have been detained, then they'd be arrested. That's on their record, or for drug possession and being forced to do that by their abuser. Now, through this bill, we're stating that those that have those records, it should not limit them in their ability to go to police to report that they have been a victim of sexual abuse. I want to get back to really the heart of this bill. We're not stating that officers don't enforce the law. And I believe that they are doing their job and doing that every single day. I've witnessed it through maybe about 11 ride-alongs now. I do see them using their ability to be officers and doing it in a constitutional policing way. So I just want to really think through of what we're saying when we're saying that, again, this bill is trying to address survivors of domestic violence. So let's think that through. And this is exactly why I support this bill, is because we're trying to eliminate those barriers that survivors are going through so that they feel more confident and comfortable to approach our officers. If they were forced to go into sex work or forced to carry drugs or whatever the situation is, we're trying to get to them because they have been a survivor of domestic violence. So this is why I'm supporting this bill. It's certainly not because there's this false dichotomy of just because we are evaluating policies that address policing, somehow we do not support our officers. I don't believe in that. I think that this is a policy that we can really put through so that officers can work with community and understanding why not every man or woman, the 1 in 3 or the 1 in 7, those survivors don't want to come forward, understanding why they don't want to, and then bringing forward a policy that tries to address it. This is just one of them. So I do support this bill and hope that our survivors that are watching are not associated further with rising crime in our city. So, and I do believe that our officers are doing everything they can to address that. So I'll yield my time.
Thank you, Councillor Senna. Councillor Pena?
I'm sorry, I raised my hand by accident.
Okay, is there anyone else? I'm just going to say, I want to say a couple of things that, I mean, this bill is, it's definitely raising a lot of emotional questions and also questions that are related to the law itself. I think that I've done a lot of reading on this, and you know, I think that there is definitely a stigma for domestic abuse, and people coming forward to talk about what domestic abuse entails. And that includes, you know, the stigma with family and friends, and sometimes even embarrassment. But there's also, with regard to the law, a definite revolving door of people that are going in and out of the system. And I'm not sure that actually we're going far enough to fix that revolving door. I mean, I think that's something that probably Councilor Bassan is feeling, or maybe, you know, there's some emotional discussion about that revolving door. I mean, these people are arrested, and then the law allows them to, you know, not be detained. And those are real problems and real issues. And they're real concerns for people who are involved with domestic violence, because there's also that threat. I think that all of us want to do the right thing in terms of supporting our police officers, because they're dealing with this issue. And that's what I heard from the chief, is they're dealing with this sort of revolving door on a regular basis. And how do we kind of keep that door from being a revolving door? So there's some real concerns about this entire discussion in my mind of, you know, how do we get to that point with whoever it may be, the legislature, the district attorney, to ensure that that revolving door is not a revolving door. And I think, you know, Councilor Davis, it seems like you've brought a lot of this to light with this bill. So I just, you know, what I heard from our counselors is that we want to find the ways to support our police officers, but also support the victims that are involved with domestic. With those statements, I guess I'll go back to Councilor Davis to close. And Councilor Davis, do you?
Madam President.
Your dog is barking, but
yes,
maybe your dog has something to say on this one.
My assistants are definitely ready for dinner. So no, thank you, Madam President. What you said is very true. There are a lot of issues involving this. Whether you've been a victim, worked with victims, who've been a police officer, everybody understands how complex this is. But I think Councilor Sena said it best, and I'll use hers as my close and just say, this is about putting the right people in jail and helping the right people get out of circumstances so that they can't, so they can improve their lives. All this does for our police officers, I'll tell you as a former cop, if you know the rules, it's easy to follow them. And so, you know, cops may not always agree with all the laws they enforce. They may not agree with all the policies of the department. But if somebody tells you this is the direction we're going, police officers are willing to do the hard work to help folks. This will help them do that. And remember, this is just directing APD to get started and start these conversations. They're going to finish this process. And so this is us asking them to do that. And I'll urge your support.
Thank you, Councilor Davis. With that, I will consider that a close, and hopefully there will be some additional steps that the council will take regarding this particular issue. And I think it's definitely a big issue that is in the forefront of our community. But as Councilor Sena said, this is not the only reason that, you know, crime is high. There's a lot of reasons. So with that, I will go to Ms. Ortega to take the vote on this particular bill.
Councilor Bassan?
No.
Councilor Davis?
Yes.
Councilor Gibson?
Yes.
Councilor Harris?
No.
Councilor Jones?
Yes.
Councilor Pena?
Yes.
Councilor Sena?
Yes.
Councilor Borrego?
Yes.
6-2 passes.
Thank you, councilors. That bill passes on a 6-2 vote. With that, we will move on to Councilor item H, which is Counselor Harris, R143. Counselor Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. This one should not be very emotional. It's R143, which is adopting a Wantabo connectivity study, making the recommendations within the study policy priorities for Wantabo Boulevard in the vicinity of Eubank Boulevard, Southern Boulevard to Harris Arroyo. I'll move a do pass.
And I'll second that, Counselor.
And I think Petra Morris is going to discuss this briefly. And this will be the last item for this evening, I believe.
Ms. Morris, welcome.
Thank you, Madam President, councillors. This bill adopts the Wantabo connectivity study. This was a roadway study done to look at possible improvements for the Wantabo Boulevard south of Southern. There are no direct east-west connections between Wantabo and Eubank and the rest of the roadway network on Wantabo south of Southern Boulevard. The study looked at 5 possible alternatives and found that the no-build alternative is actually the recommendation that scored the best. And so by adopting this resolution, it will make the recommendations of the study city policy. And so when DMD are looking at improvements to Eubank and Southern and Wantabo and Southern, they should consider the traffic volumes, as well as I've got some assistants in the background who are very supportive of this study, as well as a proposed multi-use path that could run along the edge of the biozone, Tierras Biozone. It would improve connectivity for residents in the Wantabo Hills area, getting to Sandia and Kirtland Air Force Base for their work. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. And it sounds like your staff is giving you a thumbs up on that.
Yes.
Are there any questions from Ms. Morris, councilors? It doesn't appear so. So I'll go back to Councilor Harris for the close.
Urge your support. I don't think there's any amendments. Are there, City Council staff? No. Okay, urge your support.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Harris. So we will move on to Ms. Ortega for the vote.
Councilor Bassan.
Yes.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Councilor Gibson.
Yes.
Councilor Harris.
Yes.
Councilor Jones.
Yes.
Councilor Pena.
Yes.
Councilor Sena.
Yes.
Councilor Borrego.
Yes.
8-0.
Thank you, councilors. That item passes on an 8-0 vote. There being no further business to come before this council, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, councilors.